Okay, so let's get started. I guess we have already done the introduction, so maybe this slide doesn't make much sense, but sure. Austin there, Google Developer Expert. My name, Fran. I'm part of the data team at Charboost. So a little bit of introduction of what we do at Charboost. Ads, basically. We're an ad tech mobile company. So every time you're playing a video game on your phone and you run out of lives and you see one of those videos, that might be us. That's pretty much what we do. In terms of the agenda for today, well, if you have attended the previous talk, you may know the first half, which is Beam YAML. Austin will do a bit of a presentation of what Protobuf and Beam. I'll showcase a Beam YAML use case with Protobuf and explaining some of the findings and limitations, as well as conclusions and takeaway. And then at the end, we will do a bit of a QA, so you guys can ask whatever questions you may have. So you want to join, Austin?
Yeah, so why YAML? Hopefully you guys kind of know what YAML is, but since, especially for those not in physical attendance, may wonder, oh, what's YAML? So what is it and why, right? Often used as a configuration language that hopefully everybody's roughly familiar with. But yeah, kind of no code. Wanted to highlight especially why YAML with respect to Beam specifically in the context of a prior role, kind of what language to work in. So, I mean, YAML's a neutral thing, so you don't have to deal with some people preferring Java and some people preferring Python or whatever. Just circumvent that discussion altogether. We'll probably see in maybe the YouTube video in the future a link to Jeff's other talks, and just a little nudge and aside for Pickle has some interesting interoperability with YAML and is worth really checking out for the sort of templating and other imports and other questions that came up earlier. Why Proto? Proto's all over the place under the hood for Beam. We've heard that in a few other talks today. As a general user, you may not know or even care about that. Wanted to just highlight, in this case, we're talking about Proto for your specific within the data pipelines themselves. Reasons for using would include data types, additional structuring. It's used all over the place. Also check out gRPC, and you can get into pros and cons, but certainly we'll see some efficiencies in terms of serialization and size. So Beam YAML and Proto. Sweet, these work together in your pipelines, highlighting again that Proto's in this talk is one way of representing the data as compared to something like JSON. And we kind of gave some precursors of this last year at Beam Summit.
Yeah, so okay. Let's jump into why using Beam YAML, right? Some of the pain points that some people may have whenever they decide to use Beam the first time. So some of those challenges could be setting up your development environment. There are a lot of libraries, you have to pick the language. It may take time, even for those that have experience with it. It might not be immediate. You may have some sort of template that you can use and whatnot, but still, it takes some time. Then once you have that, you have to maintain what you have, right? Right now, we are about to release 259 version of Beam. In a few weeks, it will be 260, and so on and so forth. So you need to keep up with those versions. And that's, well, tricky, besides, of course, updating whatever other libraries you might be using. And once you have those 2 points, then there is another third point, which is depending on how you develop your pipeline, it might be a bit static. So the reusability of that might be a bit limited. Like say you have created a Kafka to BigQuery pipeline. Well, that could be a bit limited, right? Because if you want to extrapolate that, it's not that you can chain new things without changing the code, and that also takes time. So a bit of a solution for that, of course, it's to use Beam YAML. It has reusability, as what we have discussing. You can just pretty much grab the Kafka IO and change it to a PubSub, or replace the BigQuery write to GCS in CSV format, or whatever thing you want, right? No code, that's like quote unquote. It is true that most of the stuff is already there. Like it has built-in functions. You can do inline transformations. If you want to go if you want to do like more complex stuff, you can always try to come up with an expansion service in Java or Python and do whatever you want to do. And that's totally fine. It has the extensibility, of course, as YAML itself, it's a declarative language. So that's already there. And it has backwards compatibility. So it means that because it's supported by the community, everything that's new, like new features, will be compatible with old features. So you don't have to really take care of that in a certain way. So I'm going to present a bit of a YAML use case with Proto. This is kind of the diagram of what I'm going to be presenting. It's going to be a Kafka topic. Proto events into this Kafka topic will be sent into BigQuery, and for that we will use Beam YAML, and we will use Dataflow as the runner. In order just to build the Protobuf, we're going to use Buff, which is pretty convenient because it encapsulates most of the stuff that it's sometimes a bit painful using Proto-C and things like that. So let's jump into the different stages. The first one would be to define our Proto and what do we want to achieve with that. This is a random example. It's a movie event. It has like event ID, user ID, things like that. That's what I would call the data contract. So between the sender and the receiver. So that's what we agree on. And, like event ID will always be string, rating will always be integer. And we can add other things on top. For instance, this Proto also contains information of how to generate the BigQuery schema. So whenever we generate the different code, we will also be generating the BigQuery schema so we can generate that table in the end. We can also add a more complex things like, say, we're using the buff validate. If we have this rating attribute that it's an integer, we can say, you know what, a rating is in between 0 to 100. So if the sender is going to send 101, which is not allowed, they won't be able to do it since the beginning. That's sort of a shift left philosophy of like failing soon and not having inconsistent data downstream your pipeline. Once we have everything defined on our data contract, the next thing to do would be to generate the different things. So out of the Proto, as I said, for this example, I'm using Buff. It's a simple CLI command. They do provide a CLI tool, which is really convenient. It would be just Buff generate. I'm preparing a blog post about how to do all this. I didn't want to go too deep into details in the presentation, but basically it would generate the Java, the Python, Go, whatever language you like, and the file descriptor, which is a binary representation of that Proto, is what Beam YAML uses to dynamically read the events, sort of like an abstract syntax tree, if you will. And of course, then we go to the secret of the whole thing, which is our Beam YAML config. And it's as simple as that. I want to read from Kafka. I have assigned a name to that transformation, which is convenient. Say, if you have many transformations and you have 5 read from Kafka, you may want to know which one belongs to what, right? Then you have a format, Proto, and the topic, and the file descriptor path, which is telling you where that file descriptor lives, and the message name, which is a fully qualified name to your message. And that's pretty much it. Then you write the BigQuery table where you want to write. It has different options here. I'm not going to go too deep into details, but some of these are pretty convenient to add into your Beam YAML code. And once you have that, we need to deploy. And to do so, well, there are many ways to deploy this, but Jeff has put together a pretty convenient template that can be instantiated via Terraform using the Flex template, Flex template object here, or resource. So it's pretty much referring to that template and your YAML. Just type Terraform plan, Terraform apply, and magic happens. You basically see this on your Dataflow UI, which is the box of events reading from Kafka and writing into BigQuery. And we can start streaming our data into the table. And that's pretty much what we see. That's a random generated data. But pretty much what you can see is that all the ratings are between the ranges that we have chosen, etc. So that's kind of the whole idea about this. A bit of some of the findings and limitations of this, of course, it's not all perfect. But what we have seen is that the cost efficiency of using Protobuf, it's a lot. I mean, this example, just take it with a pinch of salt. There are a lot of different considerations here, like the size of your events, etc. But this is a comparison between JSON events and Protobuf events in the same pipeline. It's roughly 3,500 events per second, like average. 5 pipelines. What I mean by that is that there is a data flow job with 5 consumers, and the cost of doing that with JSON could be approximately $200 versus $14, $15 with Proto. It requires way more compute power to read the exact same events from JSON than Proto, which is a pretty good thing, right? Saving money. The sum of the limitations of Protobuf and Beam. Internally, Beam YAML uses Beam row that translates into using Beam schemas. The time I was developing this bit of Protobuf inside the Kafka IO and PubSub Lite and all that, I had a bit of a problem because translating from a Proto schema to a Beam schema is not always a one-to-one translation. There are certain options that are not allowed. So sometimes it's not as easy as say, this is my Proto and it translates to Beam schema. If your Protobuf has custom options that cannot be translated to schema, to Beam schemas, then it will potentially fail. It will fail right away. It's not that it will fail in the middle of the transaction or anything. It will let you know as soon as you try to instantiate the pipeline. It is true, though, that having a library that translates that into Beam schema is pretty powerful to do other stuff, not just Beam YAML. And besides that, other kind of limitations, a bit more into Beam YAML limitations. Well, still not support all the IOs, like all that, but it's still an ongoing process. So eventually we will get there. The Kafka IO, and well, that's the one I've been talking a lot because that's the one I worked, and also the PubSub Lite one. But basically, the Kafka IO has the Confluence schema registry. It only supports that one for now, but it would be cool if we could extend that to have it a more schema registry agnostic, and we can extend it to have Buff or Apicuro or whatever other schema registry we want to have. And well, this is kind of an ongoing thing for every single software project, which is documentation can be improved. It could be better maybe on the multi-language transformations. What I was saying about the expansion service working, maybe there is a deeper topic there. And well, the documentation is there, but it can be improved basically. And finally, a bit of a conclusion. Good things about Beam YAML, like low learning curve. So if you have a developer that it's just like a junior developer trying to create its own Beam pipeline versus the same in Beam YAML, I bet they will be able to do it faster with Beam YAML. Faster iterations means you fail sooner and you can fix things also sooner, so you can iterate more. And the introduction of Proto, as we have been saying, it's sort of a shift left philosophy, and it also allows cost savings. And that's pretty much what we have for today.